What if a fortress holding just 7 prisoners became the symbol of a revolution? Let's explore Bastille Day. Hey there, I'm Leah. I'm excited to dive into today's topic.
And I'm Garrett, buzzing with curiosity for this one. Welcome to Laid Back Learning with Leah and Garrett.
Today, we're exploring Bastille Day, France's national celebration on July 14th, commemorating both the storming of the Bastille in 1789 and the Fête de la Fédération in 1790. It's a day that blends the memory of uprising with the promise of unity.
I once checked out a Bastille Day celebration in New York City, that big street fair on 60th Street, organized by the French Institute Alliance Française. I was amazed by how American cities like NYC and even places like Milwaukee or St. Louis adopt French revolutionary imagery and turn it into these vibrant, community-driven events. We're talking French food, music, waiter races. In Milwaukee, there's even a 43-foot Eiffel Tower replica and a playful storming to kick things off. It felt less like a lesson in history and more like a neighborhood coming together around the themes of liberty and community, which is pretty cool, right?
Let's open the book on this. Bastille Day, or in French Fête Nationale, and often just called Le 14 Juillet, is the national day. It's a jour férié, which means a public holiday. Government offices and many businesses close, and cities across France hold ceremonies and fireworks. If you want a quick analogy, think of the 4th of July in the United States. Both are national birthdays in spirit, with parades, flags, and music. But there's a twist here. Bastille Day consciously commemorates 2 moments: the 1789 storming of the Bastille, a royal fortress that symbolized arbitrary power, and the 1790 Fête de la Fédération, a massive unity festival 1 year later. So it's both a memory of rupture and a promise of reconciliation.
Yeah, and that dual identity shows up in how the day is staged. The biggest event is the military parade in Paris along the Champs-Élysées, that grand avenue from the Arc de Triomphe to the Place de la Concorde, where the president reviews the troops. Since 1918, that's been the route, and it's broadcast nationally. What's interesting is how the parade often features allied contingents. That's like a living signal of France's partnerships. Meanwhile, local towns mirror the big show on a smaller scale, with their own parades and ceremonies, so the national and the local sort of echo each other.
All right, let's set the scene for the run-up to 1789. France was in an economic crisis, and in May, the monarchy revived the Estates General, which was a representative assembly of 3 orders: clergy, nobility, and the commoners known as the Third Estate. The Third Estate soon declared itself the National Assembly, which was a bold claim to represent the nation. On June 20th, they took the tennis court oath, promising to write a constitution. Then on July 11th, King Louis XVI dismissed Jacques Necker. Necker was the finance minister widely seen as sympathetic to reform. That firing lit the fuse. Crowds in Paris panicked about a royal crackdown and foreign mercenaries, and they began looking for arms. Now, the Bastille was a fortress prison in Paris. Even though by 1789 it was militarily modest, it had a dark reputation because of lettres de cachet, those royal orders that could jail people without a trial or stated reason. So the Bastille stood as a symbol of unchecked authority, and that weighed heavily on people's minds.
Here's where we get to the morning of July 14th. A crowd seized muskets, firearms, and even cannon from the Hôtel des Invalides, basically a veterans' hospital and armory with big cellars of weapons. That gave them the hardware, but they believed the Bastille held gunpowder. The Régiment des Gardes Françaises, the French guards who normally protected public buildings, had elements that mutinied and joined the people. Trained soldiers in the crowd changed the balance. The governor of the Bastille, Bernard-René de Launay, faced a tense standoff. Meanwhile, Jacques de Flesselles, a city official similar to a mayor known as the Prévôt de Marchand, got pulled into the day's chaos. And here's a striking detail. When the fortress fell, it held only 7 prisoners. None were major political figures. Yet the symbolism was huge because the place embodied arbitrary justice.
Can I ask a simple why? If there were just 7 people inside, why did the Bastille matter that much?
because it stood for a system more than a head count. The Bastille represented the power to imprison without explanation through those lettres de cachet. Taking it down was like tearing out a visible pillar of arbitrary rule. People saw the walls and thought, this is what controls us, so toppling it felt like reclaiming agency.
That gets us into the heart of July 14, 1789. The crowd converged on the Bastille. Negotiations sputtered. Shots were exchanged. With the mutinous French guards bringing discipline and artillery know-how, the pressure built. According to official documents, around 200 attackers and one defender died before Governor Delaunay capitulated and ordered the gates opened to avoid a bloodbath. Then, tragically, violence flared again. Delaunay and several defenders were killed, and Jacques de Flesselles also died in the turmoil. The cause of that renewed fighting is murky. We'll circle back to that uncertainty. But from that day on, the fall of the Bastille became a rallying point. It said the people could act, even against a fortress that had towered over their lives for generations.
The momentum was real. Weeks later, on the night of August 4th, the Assembly abolished feudalism. That meant sweeping away seigneurial dues and privileges. On August 26, they proclaimed the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen, a rights charter about liberty, equality, and popular sovereignty, which is the idea that legitimate power comes from the people. So in a span of weeks, the revolution moved from a symbolic fortress to a legal program. And yet, a year after the Bastille, leaders tried to bind all that change to a sense of unity instead of endless upheaval. That's where the 1790 Fête de la Fédération comes in.
Picture this. It's July 14, 1790, 1 year later, at the Champ de Mars. Citizens had literally reshaped the grounds during what they called the Day of the Wheelbarrow, thousands pitching in to build the festival space. That civic labor wasn't just practical, it was symbolic, like building the nation with your own hands. Bishop Talleyrand, who was a statesman and at the time a bishop known for navigating complex politics, celebrated Mass. General Lafayette, hero of both the American and French revolutions, swore an oath to the Constitution, and then King Louis XVI did the same. The National Guard marched in heavy rain along the Boulevard du Temple. Crowds were enormous, around 250,000 people, and the mood swung from solemn vows to joyful celebration. There were fireworks, fine wine, and yes, some exuberant folks even ran nude through the streets to say, in their own way, "We are free." It was a unity festival to cap a year of intense change.
Fast forward to the 1870s and 1880. France wrestled with which revolutionary date to elevate as a permanent national holiday. Lawmakers debated several options: May 5th, when the Estates General convened, August 4th for abolishing feudalism, January 21st for the king's execution, and July 14th. Deputy Benjamin Raspail introduced the law to enshrine July 14th, and the genius was framing it to honor both 1789 and the unifying festival of 1790. Votes in late June 1880 approved it. By July 6th, it was official. Then the morning parade in Paris became an annual thing from 1880 onward, and since 1918, the main parade has followed the Champs-Élysées route from the Arc de Triomphe to Place de la Concorde. It's had remarkable continuity. Paused during the German occupation in 1940 to 1944, when Free France marked the day in London under Charles de Gaulle, and scaled back in 2020 because of COVID-19. Otherwise, it's a through line of civic ritual.
And the modern layers keep adding meaning. The president reviews the troops at Place de la Concorde, foreign dignitaries attend, and allied formations sometimes lead or join. In 1994, Eurocorps, a multinational European military corps, opened the parade and included German soldiers marching in France for the first time since 1944, a vivid image of reconciliation. In 2004, British forces led to mark a century since the Entente Cordiale, with the red arrows flying overhead. For the centenary of World War I's start in 2014, flags from dozens of combatant countries opened the ceremony. In 2017, the U.S. president attended to commemorate 100 years since America entered World War I, showing that the parade is also a diplomatic stage. It hasn't all been easy. In 2002, there was a foiled assassination attempt on President Jacques Chirac during the parade, and in 2016, a devastating truck attack in Nice killed 86 people during holiday festivities. Those tragedies shaped security and remembrance, but the day persists, balancing pride with reflection.
Outside Paris, the story travels. Garrison towns like Toulon and Belfort host their own parades with local units and reservists. Abroad, the day takes on local flavor. Liège in Belgium, which was honored for its World War I resistance, sometimes celebrates Bastille Day even bigger than Belgium's own national holiday. Fireworks by Congress Hall and a dance hosted by the French consul draw big crowds. In India, Pondicherry's festivities trace back to its French heritage. In Tahiti, what started as permission to celebrate on Bastille Day evolved into Hiva I Tahiti, canoe races, tattooing, firewalks, and music with traditional instruments like the nasal flute and ukulele, a showcase of Polynesian identity that still nods to the date. London throws multiple parties across neighborhoods, and in North America you see Vancouver and Toronto turn streets into French markets and music stages. The global reach shows how a national anniversary can be a canvas for hybrid identities.
Real talk. Why does the Paris parade include foreign troops at all? Isn't a national day supposed to be only about the nation?
Good question. Featuring allies is diplomatic signaling. Basically, it's a way to show who your partners are and what relationships matter. Since 1918, it's been common to invite contingents that reflect current ties, sometimes reconciliation, sometimes shared missions. It says, we're proud of our forces, and we're also part of a wider network.
Okay, let's move on to a tricky historical question. When the Bastille's governor surrendered, violence resumed and Delaunay was killed. But the precise cause of that renewed fighting is unclear. Some accounts point to misunderstandings in the chaos, others suggest emotions boiling over. With crowds, fear, and weapons all in the same tight space, the line between a surrender and a perceived threat can blur in seconds.
I see that. I think about the human side. You've got insurgents who just took casualties, you've got defenders who feel cornered, and everyone's running on adrenaline. Even with a capitulation, one sharp sound, a sudden movement, or a rumor can cascade. That doesn't excuse anything. It's just acknowledging that the stakes and raw emotion were sky high, which makes confusion more likely.
Totally. And misunderstandings in uprisings are almost a pattern. We see it in a lot of crowd events where communication breaks down. If someone misreads a gesture or hears a shot they weren't expecting, fear can turn a ceasefire into a new clash. For me, that uncertainty is part of why historians are careful. They can line up documents and testimonies, but the fog of that moment resists a neat answer.
Yeah, and it wraps back to the day's deeper symbolism. The Bastille's fall, however chaotic, became a touchstone. Then the next year's Federation Festival tried to cool the temperature and make unity visible. So the holiday that France chose later in 1880 deliberately holds both truths, the hard birth of change and the aspiration to knit the country together.
Switching gears just a little, pop culture has had fun with the theme. There's the British alternative band Bastille, named after the frontman's birthday on July 14th. Rush, the Canadian prog band, did a song literally titled Bastille Day. French film has played with it too, a 1933 romantic comedy called Bastille Day by René Clair, and more recently a 2016 film titled Bastille Day starring Idris Elba. It's interesting how the date's ideas, liberty, upheaval, unity keep echoing across music and film. Let's take a turn here into a what if. What if King Louis XVI had not dismissed Jacques Necker on July 11, 1789? Necker was seen as a reform-minded finance minister. If he'd stayed, maybe the immediate panic in Paris doesn't spike, the crowds don't rush for arms on the same timeline, and the Bastille doesn't become the spark it did. I could imagine a slower, more procedural path where the National Assembly keeps drafting, the king tries to ride the wave of constitutional change, and the symbolic focal point of the revolution becomes something like the August 4 abolition of feudalism. That would tilt the story toward legal reform over insurrection. Maybe the national holiday, decades later, lands on a different note.
I'm down for that thought experiment. If July 14 hadn't exploded, the repertoire of symbols would shift. Without the storming, the day that unites people might have been the Federation Festival alone, or August 4, as you said. Diplomatically, the signal sent on the parade stage might have looked different too. Still a platform for alliances, but tied to a narrative of steady reform instead of a fortress falling. Inside France, you might see less emphasis on storming imagery and more on oaths and civic labor. The Day of the Wheelbarrow becomes the icon, and internationally, the way cities celebrate abroad could pivot: fewer mock stormings, more unity-themed festivals and community feasts. It's wild how swapping a spark can ripple through centuries of ceremony.
Kind of gives you something to sit with, huh? Even small changes at the top can shape what people sing about, what they march past, and the stories they tell their kids each July. That's a thread worth pulling on. But for now, I like that the real holiday holds both rupture and reconciliation side by side.
Stay curious and keep exploring the world around you.
Thanks for joining us on Laid Back Learning with Leah and Garrett. Until next time,